We'd like to welcome you today to our webinar entitled Avoiding the 5 Pitfalls of Employee Recognition Programs. Thank you for joining us. My name is Joe Staples. I'm the Chief Marketing Officer for Motivosity, and Motivosity is a company that provides employee recognition software platform. And I'm joined by Tom Burton, who's the co-founder of Health Catalyst, a healthcare BI and data warehousing company. And we're here to talk about employee recognition, what you can expect. And then the highlight of this is really going to be Tom taking you through the Health Catalyst story and the things that they've accomplished. And let me just give you briefly a little bit of background on Health Catalyst, just so you understand where we're coming from on this story. This is a company that has just seen phenomenal growth and just a lot of success over the years since being founded. They won Modern Healthcare Award 4 years in a row, Gallup Worldwide Award 3 years in a row, Glassdoor 2 years in a row. They're also considered really an innovator. They've received a number of awards, including being listed on the Inc. 5000, Inc. 500. And they've seen great, really rapid growth, having grown from just 5 people when the company was started back in 2011 to over 700 team members today. And then kind of the proof point is if you look at the kind of business that they've built, one of the great metrics is the fact that they have such low voluntary turnover rates, under 8% against an industry benchmark that's over 11. So with that, let's get into our content here. So as you look at this, the first thing is, what do these 5 items have in common, and what do they have to do with employee recognition? So the Cheshire Cat, Mr. Fusion, and the Flux Capacitor, a double fisherman's knot, Raiders of the Lost Ark, and some buff guy standing on top of the world. Well, in our time together this morning, we're going to talk about each one of these, but collectively, these images represent the 5 most common pitfalls of employee recognition programs. So pitfall number 1, you'll remember the Cheshire Cat from Alice in Wonderland. The cat's most famous conversation begins with Alice asking, what would you tell me? Please, which way should I go? And the cat replied, well, that depends a good deal on where you want to get to. Which Alice says, I don't really care. And the cat tells her, well, then it doesn't matter which way you go. Alice wants to get somewhere, and the cat replies, oh, so you're sure to do that if you walk long enough. So the first pitfall that companies fall into is failing to define what success looks like, where they want to go with their recognition program and their culture in general. Their intentions are typically good, but they just oftentimes just jump in just to do something. And as Tom can tell you, that's really the wrong place to start.
Well, Joe, it's great to be here today, and I'm going to share just some of our experience and some principles that we've learned as we've tried to implement a comprehensive recognition program here at Health Catalyst. And probably the first core principle that we found is to be very deliberate about how you define your culture. And there are kind of 3 core components we see, 3 questions. First is, why do you exist? That's really your mission. Second, how do you do your work? And that's really a prioritized set of operating principles. And then finally, what do you look for when you're hiring or trying to keep people at your company? And those are your cultural attributes. So a number of years ago, when we were just about to take on our first kind of major investment, the first couple of years, we kind of bootstrapped it. And then Sequoia Capital heard about us and said, we got to invest in you guys, you got to grow much faster. And so we took some time and said, well, we want to keep the good stuff, the culture that's really helped us grow to this point. Now we've got to grow much faster. And so we took a little trip down to Disneyland, and we said, they have an amazing culture. They've done some great things. And we actually went on a behind the scenes tour of Disneyland. And they have so many people that work in the parks, and they're always courteous. They're always just friendly, and you always feel like you're treated like a VIP. So how do they do that? And they took us on this tour and showed that they teach these core principles, and they have prioritized list of operating principles. And for Disney, it's first and foremost safety. Second, it's staying courteous. Third is putting on a good show, and fourth is efficiency. And they're prioritized in that order. So if a kid is standing up on a ride, they're not going to be worried about being courteous. They're going to, yell and say, sit down so he doesn't get hurt. But if someone comes up and asks, where's the restroom, they're not going to worry about that person's holding up the line. And so we came up with our own mission, our own operating principles, and our own cultural attributes. And this is what we came up with, and they've been so useful. So our mission, this is why we exist. It's to provide, great insight producing analytics, great services, and be a best place to work. And it's all in service of massively helping to fix the healthcare challenges we have in the country. So we want to be that massive force for change and improving outcomes in healthcare. When we think about our operating principles, these are our prioritized operating principles. So number one is outcomes, second, ownership, third, pragmatic innovation, and fourth, transparency. And this is how we actually do our work. This is how we make trade-offs. And we prioritize first and foremost our customers being able, our hospital and clinic customers being able to make improvements for their patients. We put that ahead of maybe hitting our sales target for the end of the quarter. And we've had trade-offs like that where we've had to make a call. If we really push this prospect hard, they'll sign. But to really have long-term impact, we need to get this chief medical officer on board with the strategy before we force it through. Let's get everybody on board. And so we prioritize, a better long-term outcome versus that short-term focus for hitting our sales target for the quarter. That's just one example. So then we have our hiring formula, which is we look for people that are smart, hardworking, and humble. And we were deliberate about defining what does that mean. And so those are our kind of 4 operating principles and our 3 cultural attributes. And those are the 7 core components that help us achieve our mission. And so we were very deliberate about writing that down. And we took, an offsite, a couple of days to really get everybody on the leadership team to share their thoughts. And then we implemented it company-wide, and we've, kept that from the time we were 20, 30 people to now over 700 people.
That's awesome. And, I think one of the things that clearly stands out is, as you mentioned, how deliberate you were in defining that upfront and early on. Too often, we'll talk to companies and it's almost an afterthought. They recognize that they have to do it. They spend very little time on it, and it just doesn't have much of an impact. Definitely you guys were different than that. Before we go on to pitfall number 2, if I could just call your attention, if you hover your mouse, depending on how your screen is set up, either top of your screen or the bottom of your screen, it will reveal a set of controls, and Q&A is one of those. And if you have a question, we're going to be doing a Q&A portion at the end of the webinar. Simply click on that Q&A box and type your question in, and we will get to as many of those as we can during that portion. So pitfall number 2, this is what's called a double fisherman's knot. Now, what does it have to do with successful employee recognition? This is a knot that ties 2 ropes together. So pitfall number 3 is a failure to link 2 important business items, linking recognition and company values. too often, what we've seen is a new program gets introduced and it stands as a silo. It doesn't reinforce the other programs you already have running inside the business. And very quickly, what you end up with are employees that are kind of on overload mode for all the things that you've thrown at them and really questioning what they're supposed to pay attention to. So you've worked hard on developing your company values. You've gone through some exercises to do that. But I think one good self-reflection is to think about how much have those values been internalized? Do our employees even know what the values are? What is being done to help them live those values? If you want to drive really the internalization of the company values deep into the organization, your recognition program has to be inseparably connected with those values. So a great way for employees to learn and internalize those values is to reward them when behavior around those values is being done. So Tom, talk about how you guys have done that.
Great. So I think this core principle of reinforcing your culture frequently is absolutely key. So the first step is to tie your recognition program to your culture. You want to deliberately define the frequency and the modality of that cultural reinforcement. And you want to place character requirements actually into your job descriptions and have them as a core part of your job descriptions. And then build your culture into your daily operations. So here's an example. This is a picture of Tally taking a new team or a new group of team members around, and we have these cultural attributes plaques hanging throughout our whole building. And he's describing what it means to be humble. And we have several bullet points there describing the attributes of listening first. And so we, on day one, we spend a lot of time on reinforcing that. We've also made it a deliberate part of our board meetings, every all team member meeting. Those happen monthly. We bring it up in our one-on-ones. Every manager with the team members that report to them bring up the cultural attributes and operating principles. In our operational meetings, we bring it up. But perhaps the biggest reinforcement of the culture is that our rewards program happens daily. And we're reinforcing our culture daily with our rewards program. And I'll show you exactly how we do that in a little bit. Here's an example of one of our job description lists of our knowledge and character needed for a particular role. And you can see we've called out living the health catalyst way, which is the cultural attributes and operating principles. Here's another way. This is from one of our operational meetings. We measure outcomes, which is that top operating principle. And so you can see here we're measuring how many outcomes or results with improvement our clients have achieved over time, and in particular categories of how hard was it to achieve and how much value did it provide to the customer. And so we're looking at this on a weekly basis and tying that cultural attribute to some of our measurement.
Okay. You know, I think one of the other things that has always stood out to us at Motivosity about Health Catalyst is you don't take a single-threaded approach to emphasizing these values. As you showed, you use a lot of different methods, wall posters, accountability metrics, obviously the operationalizing of it. But I think that's certainly been key to part of the success that you've seen.
Absolutely.
So pitfall number 3, you know, certainly desk drops and posters, they do only go so far. And then if that's all you're doing, things can kind of blend into white noise almost for employees. So programs that rely on someone from HR to go out and seek MVP nominations, sort through them, get a short list, assemble your selection committee, you get the idea. It becomes very labor intensive to do, And what we've seen is those are the companies that start off with a good recognition program, but then struggle to really keep it going. And a lot of them will see those programs fizzle out over a 6-month period of time. So pitfall number 3 is not using technology and tools to help you build your culture. Now, it might not include Mr. Fusion and the flux capacitor, but technology can help you really operationalize your recognition program and cut down on the time that it takes to administer it. So as you look for the right tool, some things to keep in mind. It shouldn't be overly complex, so it becomes more trouble to use than it's worth. It should play well with the rest of your tech stack, so have some key integrations that would dovetail into other technologies that you're running. It should cover a broad scope of a complete recognition program. And it should give team members really the kind of rewards that they want, and not game them or really break down trust levels as you provide kind of some smoke and mirror point systems that people can use to get a free water bottle someday. So Tom, talk about this one.
So right after we'd gotten that large investment, we wanted to figure out how could we leverage technology to reinforce our culture, and not just, once in a while, daily. And I think that's the first core concept here. You've got to reinforce those cultural attributes and operating principles daily. And the only way to do that is to leverage technology. Technology can really help streamline that connection. And it also eliminates geographic barriers. And so we went on this search, and that's when we came across Motivosity, and we started using Motivosity, and it's just been awesome. It was super easy to install and get up and running. And then as we've grown, it's just part of our normal onboarding process. So the way this works is every team member at Health Catalyst gets $10 every month to spend on recognizing their managers, peers, the people that report to them, anyone in the company. Now they can't spend it on themselves. So so what they do is when they see someone living one of our values, they'll shoot them a quick thank you with an associated $5 or $2 or whatever dollar amount they want. And so you're getting that. There are literally dozens of these happening in our company every single day. And there's no laborious process to get it approved. It's just automatic. Every month, every team member gets $10 to give for reinforcing when they see the culture being lived well. Now, managers and directors and VPs, they get larger amounts depending on the size of their responsibility. So, for example, I'm on the senior leadership team. I get $200, and so I can spread that more broadly. Some of our vice presidents get $50. Our managers get 25. It goes on down. The nice thing is Motivosity made it super easy to design it how we wanted to, and we could set those thresholds wherever we wanted to. Let me just show you how it works. So if I had one of my team members, Sarah Proven here, she's our head of education, I would just type her name in, and then you can see up here, there are 8 different things I can select. I could write a quick note saying, hey, Sarah, thanks for your great work on building the education for the webinar last week. It went really well, and I think the team members really learned the principles you were teaching. So I could write that out, and then I could choose hardworking, or I could choose pragmatic innovation, whichever I felt she best demonstrated.
And just to clarify, those values are specific.
Yeah, those are the ones I just put over. So in the setup process, which literally only takes about 15 minutes, I type in those values, and then they're set for the company, and that's what people can select from. And so we chose our 4 operating principles, our 3 cultural attributes, and then we also have our wellness program tied into Motivosity. Nice. And so I can put $5 there, and then I hit submit, and it sends it, and it's in her Motivosity account, and then she can use that to buy anything she wants on Amazon, in the company store. It's not some point deal where I got to translate into dollars. It's real dollars, and she can spend those however she wants. She can also, we sponsor some charities, so she can contribute out to the charities. And so it's super easy, and it takes literally 2 minutes for me to write a quick thank you, tell which value I'm appreciative of them living, and then they get that instant feedback and reward.
And then who sees that?
So everybody in the company can see that. Now I can mark it private. You can see here I have a checkbox. I can mark it private if it's, maybe she was transparent in a really tough situation. And it was a private thing that I didn't want the whole company to know about. I could check that mark private, and then only she sees it. But usually you make it public, and there's kind of a feed. You can see just every few minutes the culture being reinforced by someone thanking someone else in the company for doing a great job, being hardworking, coming up with an innovative solution to a problem. Any one of our attributes, being transparent with someone, gets reinforced.
That's awesome. I think just to reemphasize one thing that you brought up is this no approval needed.
Right. We approved the framework as a leadership team and said every team member gets $10, managers get 25, directors 50. We approved that framework. Now, if they don't use all the money, they lose it. So you gotta, which motivates people. They're like, man, I want to, especially towards the end, this refreshes every month. Towards the end of the month, we see lots of things going back and forth because they know if they don't use it, it's kind of wasted. And so people try to really look, they're actively looking for reinforcing great behaviors that match our cultural attributes and operating principles.
Yeah, and that's such a difference, of other companies that will approach recognition from a top-down approach.
Yeah,
you have to get approval for everything.
This is bottom up.
Yeah, and it just allows employees to go find the great things that everybody's doing every day. It's terrific. I think the other thing that's interesting that surprises a lot of people is what those few dollars will mean. I mean, you can give somebody a couple dollars as a recognition, and on the surface you think, really? Will that motivate anybody?
Well, it's the combination. I think what people care about the most is, hey, someone recognized that I'm living the cultural attributes. That means more than the $3 they got. But those $3 add up, and
and that's kind of what keeps people in the system and engaged.
Exactly.
Yeah, but it is the recognition.
It's the recognition that's the most meaningful. Yeah. And because it's so easy with the technology to do that, it gets used every single day, dozens and dozens of times a day.
Terrific. Okay, let's go on to pitfall number 4. So hopefully you recognize this scene. Great movie, Raiders of the Lost Ark. And not to take away from any of the other great scenes of the movie, like Indy running from the boulder, or Marion's meltdown in the burning bar, or when Indy gets tossed into the pit full of snakes. But you'll remember this scene where Indy uses the sun hitting the jewel on the top of his staff to illuminate the answer to his quest. But you might not remember that there was a board that was filled with holes, and the staff had to go into the right hole, and the staff had to be the right length. Otherwise, the measurement would be off. And if you'll remember Indy's celebration when he realized that the bad guys were digging in the wrong place. So pitfall number 4 is about measuring the wrong things. So we live in a data-driven world, but very often too much data can be as bad as not enough data. So what gets measured is what gets team members' attention. So it's important, as you think about recognition, to carefully analyze what's being measured when it comes to that recognition. And overemphasizing the wrong metric can oftentimes end up promoting the wrong behavior.
Thanks, Joe. So we think about, so what are the right things to measure? And as you're thinking about how effective is your rewards program, we actually measure participation in cultural reinforcement. We evaluate which parts of our culture need more emphasis, because we can see which are being rewarded the most or the least. And then we also can evaluate how different departments are collaborating with each other. So here's a principle we actually teach our clients. And this comes from Deming, who was kind of the guru of quality improvement theory. He said, if we measure the right things about processes, we'll manage and improve those as a system. And we actually learn. If we measure something for accountability and we really overemphasize it, we start to get what we call sub-optimization, where maybe 5 things are important, but we're only measuring one of them, and so the other 4 get ignored. And then if you really overemphasize it, you get people gaming the system. You know, they'll make up the numbers, or they'll cheat, and that's because you're emphasizing the number way too hard. So one of the things that we've really liked about Motivosity is it helps to reinforce the culture in a way that the measurement makes sense. So a story, Alina was our very first customer 10 years ago. And a number of years into our relationship with them, they were having a challenge of retaining really smart talent. We train them up, and then they became really valuable in the marketplace, and they would leave and go be the director of analytics at some competitor or across the country. And so Alina ended up smart sourcing their entire analytics department. About 60 people shifted from being Alina team members to being Health Catalyst team members. So that was a big change for them. And we were worried, how are they gonna, they didn't like sign up for this. They didn't say, oh, I wanna join Health Catalyst. How are they gonna transition? How do we make sure we're engaged and keeping them involved? And we used Motivosity as a tool to really measure that and reinforce the culture at Health Catalyst. And I'm really happy to say that that team that's now Health Catalyst team members embedded at Alina, they started out with much lower engagement scores. They're now the most engaged of all of the teams that we have. And I think one of the tools that helped us really reinforce that was Motivosity. Let me show you some of the things that we can actually measure in Motivosity. So if you look in the bottom right-hand corner, this is last year. We had 20,000 thank yous going back and forth, reinforcing our cultural attributes and operating principles. That's 93% participation across the company. So pretty significant. Every person, well, not every person, but 93% of people received some sort of reinforcement that they were living the culture. Now, the next one on the bottom left there, you can see which cultural areas by department are giving the most appreciation per direct report. And you can see that our G&A, you know, our people team, they do it the best. But then you can see our other departments, how they reward their direct reports. And you can see, boy, we may need to work on our sales area. They're the lowest right now. And so that's an area we could maybe reinforce. And then you can see, and this screenshot was taken a while ago, of our 496 team members, we had 451 participate, and so 24 hadn't logged in yet. So that gives me, I'm the protector of our culture. I actually reach out to those folks and say, hey, I've noticed you're not participating in our recognition program, and I encourage them to sign up and start using it.
And Tom, let's just go back to this one. What insight do you get out of seeing who's participating and kind of how the information flows from one department to another? Who's recognizing Who?
Yeah, I think I have a slide later
Oh, do you?
that actually shows that.
Okay.
But we're able to evaluate, what cultural attribute are we struggling with the most? What department isn't interacting as much with another department? And you can see that in the data just from who's rewarding who's thanking who, and which cultural attributes do we struggle with the most.
Awesome. I also saw something that maybe you didn't feel comfortable bragging about. I hope you don't mind me sharing this. But over time, the number of promoters for Health Catalyst, the number I saw grew by 37%. So people who would recommend that their friends work here. And your numbers are great. You guys do such a good job on this.
Well, it's part of our core strategy. If we create a great environment for people to work and they enjoy working, they take better care of our customers, they want to stay, they bring their talented colleagues and say, hey, you got to work here. This is the best place I've ever worked.
Yeah, awesome. Okay, that brings us to our last pitfall. And unfortunately, it has its roots in kind of a negative word, ego. We've touched on it a little bit earlier, but this really is the pitfall that happens when top-down thinking leaders get in the way of allowing amazing things to happen. So it's when leaders implement an employee recognition program that's driven from the top, where employees can't do anything without getting that all-important management approval, where kind of the perception of doing something is more important than actually doing something. They just want to look good, not necessarily want to drive results. And from what we've seen, this will bring down a recognition program faster than anything. So it's really, the pitfall is defined as letting that top-down thinking get in the way of amazing things happening.
Yeah, so the core principle here is you've got to trust your front line. They know what's going on way better than the senior leaders do. And so don't micromanage how the rewards get allocated. Set up a framework, no approvals needed, and then teach some core principles. One of the things we learned from Disney is they don't have a huge policy manual. What they have is these core principles, and they prioritize them and then teach their people how to apply those principles. But they allow them to ad lib on those. As long as they're following one of those core principles, it's fine. And so teach those core principles, let your team members govern how they apply those principles on their own. Now, the other key here is allocate a meaningful budget per team member per year for giving in your rewards program. So at Health Catalyst, we budget about $275 per team member per year. It's the best investment we've ever made.
And you consider it an investment. That's what I love about every time you talk about it.
It's an investment because now there is a lot of scientific proof behind this. So we use Gallup to measure our team member engagement. And what Gallup has shown that an engaged team member is 5 to 10 times more productive, does a better job, delivers higher value to your customers than an unengaged or disengaged team member. They actually have a ratio that they measure how many engaged team members as a ratio to fully disengaged team members. And the average across the country is around 2 engaged team members for every 1 disengaged team member. At Health Catalyst, our ratio is 18 to 1.
Wow.
And we're trying to get it better than that.
Wow.
But you think about the productivity and the, someone that's engaged and really cares and is bought in thinking like an owner, how much better they're going to take care of a customer than someone that's just like putting in their time. It's a job. It's not a passion. Well, one of the ways that you can have it become a passion is to connect it to the mission, connect it to the values, and you reinforce those on a daily basis.
And I think it's also interesting to, to put it in perspective. So $275 per employee per year. You're on average, let's say you're paying employees, $50,000 a year.
We're a little higher because they're high tech.
There you go. But you think of the impact that just an extra $200 or $300 can mean to the business.
It's a huge impact.
Yeah.
And I haven't even talked about one of the cool features in Motivosity is when people give you money, you can pay it forward. You can actually use what dollars you've received, and you can gift that back. And so some of these dollars are just like spinning around, having a positive impact over and over and over again. It's really awesome. So this is the chart I was referring to earlier, Joe. This is how you can see, these are the major departments inside of Health Catalyst, and you can see how departments are giving and reinforcing the culture with other departments. And you can see there's a lot of cross-pollination going, a lot of reinforcing the culture across departments. Now, if we saw one of these that we would expect a thicker line between two departments that's not happening, that's like an early warning sign that, okay, these departments aren't connecting as much as they should. So it's a great tool for looking at that. So I hope that we've been able to talk about some core principles. These principles have really helped us as we've grown rapidly. Just to review, we talked about deliberately defining your culture, about reinforcing your culture frequently, leveraging technology to do that. And we have been very grateful to Motivosity and they've helped us a ton in that area. Measuring the right things, and then trusting your front line. And I know that these 5 principles have dramatically helped Health Catalyst as we've grown to have a great rewards program that reinforces our culture and helps create a great place to work.
What a great story, and what a great business that you've built. So let's move on to our Q&A portion. And I think oftentimes Q&A is the best part of a webinar. So you'll see in this slide that there is a ribbon that you should be seeing on your screen if you hover either over the top or the bottom. And if you have questions that you would like to ask, just type the question in and we'll get to them. So let me just glance through some of these questions. One of the first one, a little bit of a logistics question. The webinar is being recorded, and all of you will receive a link to that recording if you missed a portion of it, if you joined late, if you want to share it out with other people. Here's a good one, Tom. This question is asked: what suggestions do you have to get support from the top, from the CEO, to implement a recognition program?
So CEOs and CFOs are sometimes the most skeptical of executive sponsors, and I think leveraging the Gallup data that I mentioned earlier really helped turn it into, okay, this is a strategic investment, not just an expense. And I think that's the key, is helping people recognize that a fully engaged team member is so much more productive, so much more of an asset to making sure your customers are well taken care of. And so I think that's the key strategy that I've seen work the best, is recognizing that it's an investment in your engagement level of your team members.
Great. This next question is, maybe we made this sound too rosy for this person. They ask, what are some of the challenges that you've had to overcome as you implemented your recognition program?
I think just getting all the team members bought in. especially some of the senior leaders, I think that's a challenge. And the best way that I found to do that is I would send them a thank you personally when I saw them doing something great, or I'd kind of copy them on something that I saw one of their team members doing great, and just showing that, man, we can reinforce the culture through this kind of a program.
Awesome. Let me answer this next one. So someone writes, is there a way to integrate other more measurable bonuses into the system, such as people who excel at upselling for a sales bonus, et cetera? So Motivosity has really three components to the recognition piece. One is the peer component that we spent most of the time talking about today, but there are also awards that you can set up. So a sales team, as an example, can put in there, the upseller award, and when somebody accomplishes it or hits a milestone with it, that can be awarded by a peer or a manager. There can be a specific dollar amount tied to that. There can be a specific badge that then follows that employee around on the system. So that is completely doable. And then the third component of recognition is around milestones. So people love to be recognized as they hit their 5-year mark or their 1-year mark with the company. Their birthdays are recognized. This makes it an easy way to make sure that that really just happens very seamlessly without much administrative overhead.
Yeah, we do that. We have a 1, 2, 3, 5, 10-year reward that's automatically set up in Motivosity that just happens. We also do one for birthdays and annual renewal or their anniversary of their hire date.
Right. Awesome.
And then we use that badges feature too. So we designate certain leadership team members. We have like a transformation award where someone's really made a significant difference in one of our clients, helping them massively improve an outcome. And so our chief clinical officer rewards that on a quarterly basis. But it's really easy to do, and you can set up as many of those badges as you want.
Right. Yeah. Awesome. Next question. This one would be for you, Tom. How did you decide how much money to allocate for each level? So frontline, managers, directors, et cetera.
So we actually tried a couple of different ways of doing this. Originally, we just did it by, the number of direct reports, which is a feature inside of Motivosity. You can just set a dollar amount per direct report. We found that didn't work quite as well because we have a lot of field managers where they're not the direct HR manager, but they're managing them kind of as a consultant on that particular project. So we ended up tying it more to their seniority, their title in the company. So we did it by director, vice president, senior vice president, et cetera. The dollar amount that we decided on, we actually met as a leadership team with our extended leadership team, basically all the vice presidents and above. And we said, we don't want to go overboard. We don't want this to be tens of thousands of dollars per team member. And I don't think it needs to be.
Right.
It's more, we tied it to, if you were to reward every team member that's on your team, if they did something great that month, how many either direct people do you manage or that you are directing their work? They may not be your HR responsibility, but you're directly involved in your work. And so we kind of guesstimated that. And then we've tweaked it over time. We used to just do $40 for directors, and we bumped that to $50 because we found that they were running out and they had great things to reward. Super easy in Motivosity to set that up and tweak it. And we even have done some custom stuff with our wellness program, which Motivosity, we tied into their API, and we're able to have our health and wellness program, which, that's part of what we deliver to our customers. We tied it directly to Motivosity because it was just an administrative nightmare to try to do it on our own. And so we just leveraged the Motivosity infrastructure using their APIs, which was great.
That's great. I'll give you also some insight kind of across our customer base. The minimum that we have seen still be very effective is $3 per employee per month. We've seen that if you drop kind of below that $3 threshold, then people want to recognize other people, and there isn't any money to give them, so it becomes a little bit problematic. You can do recognition without, specifically, not in the complete setup of the system, but if I wanted to recognize somebody and I was out of money, but I wanted it to show up on the social wall, you can do that. So kind of 3's the minimum, and then I think Tom makes a good point. It doesn't have to be, these high dollar amounts. It's so much more about the recognition that they're receiving, but then the money does add up and tends to fuel some motivation. That was a great question. Next question, and I'll just again remind you, mouse over either top of your screen or bottom of your screen, click the Q&A button if you do have a question. But the next one says, ties back to values. Is there a model that you used to create your company values?
Well, we kind of patterned our operating principles after Disney's, and we actually spent some time with the Disney Institute and did that backstage tour. And so their model was teach some really core principles and prioritize those operating principles in a way that you've predefined the correct trade-offs. And so that was a model we use for our operating principles. There are a lot of different models out there that can be helpful. I think the more important thing is to write them down, make them explicit, be deliberate about it. Another one that we've used is the entrepreneurial operating system. Has a great kind of method to think through what's your vision, what are your values, and part of that then turns into your hiring process. Do people, Jim Collins talks about, do we have the right people on the bus? Right. And then are they in the right seats on the bus? Right. And so how can you map out the criteria for should they be on the bus or not?
Yeah, as you mentioned, there's a lot of different methods out there, but I think my favorite one is one promoted and espoused by Patrick Lencioni. You guys will know him from wrote 5 Dysfunctions of a Team, yep, The Advantage, and he's got a very straightforward way of getting at the right values. And I think if you don't use a model that's been tested, sometimes you can kind of dig into this and get to something that you think are good values, and they're not going to resonate with the employees because they're not true to who you are. Or they're too aspirational.
Or too generic.
Yeah, or too generic, right. It could be.
He talks about that. I think.
Could blend in with any company could have them. Yeah.
Like we need everybody to be honest. Those are kind of like table stakes.
Right. Pat emphasizes that a lot. Yeah. We've got a couple more questions here. And I'm guessing that this one is based on the fact that we talked about peer recognition and then recognition from management. But the question is, what have you found to be the most impactful? Recognition from peers or recognition from management?
Well, you definitely need both, but I actually think the peer recognition is more impactful, and it's mostly just the sheer volume. If you have 100% or 90% of your team members reinforcing each other's behavior, that's way more impactful than a single manager reinforcing it. And so you get, depending on what your manager to individual contributor ratio is, you get 5x the impact from those peer-to-peer recognitions. So I would say you definitely still want both, but the peer-to-peer is so powerful.
Yeah, and going back to, you referenced Gallup. One of the parts of the Gallup study talks about having a friend at work and how important that is to
Absolutely.
To retention and productivity. And so as you consider friends at work, boy, there's nothing that reinforces that as much as somebody doing a shout out to you and saying, thanks for staying late. Great performance on whatever it happened to be.
Yep.
Well, Tom, we've got one last question, and I think this one probably comes based on experience that people have had with recognition programs, and we talked a little bit about the fact that sometimes they come out great and they're well thought out and there's big fanfare, and then over time kind of fizzle and go away. So the question is, what actions have you taken to keep your recognition program fresh for employees, not letting it get stale?
Yeah,
and you've been using Motivosity for how long?
6 years.
6 years. And your engagement rates are
99th percentile in the country.
There you go.
So I think a lot of it is the framework that you set up at the beginning. It's easy for programs to become stale if they're hard to administer. And I think that's one of the things we've loved about Motivosity is because it's so straightforward and easy to administer, and because we're constantly getting new, fresh recognitions of, really every day, people saying, man, you live this value well. It stays fresh because it's continually getting these great new stories of people living the values. So I think the key is not having a super burdensome, heavy administration, heavy program, but leveraging technology to make it happen where it happens organically. If it's organic, it stays fresh on its own, and you don't have to put a lot of effort into, we gotta get everybody remotivated about submitting their nominations.
Right. Figure out who we didn't give the award to last quarter.
Yeah, we don't have to do any of that. Right. It's kind of like crowdsourced.
Right.
And that makes it sustainable over time. And like I said, we've been using it for 6 years. It's only grown in popularity over that time.
Terrific. Well, Tom, thanks for taking the time. Thanks for sharing your story. I mean, it is an absolute success story relative to what companies look to build around culture, around employee engagement, and then all the business benefits that come with that. So thanks so much for sharing the Health Catalyst story.
Well, thank you. Thanks for building a great tool. It's made it a lot easier to do that. And it's been a pleasure chatting with you about this. If you can't tell, I'm passionate about this.
Right.
And I think it makes a big difference in how well your team members are engaged and how much then they can help your customers.
And thanks to all who participated on the webinar as audience members this day. We appreciate your time, hope that it was valuable for you, and wish that you have a great day. Thank you.